probably seen a lot of promises in your life from your friends, from your family, from yourself to yourself. But have you ever stopped to wonder what a promise actually means and where a promise actually comes from? Because to be quite frank, I have always tried not to break promises, but whenever I've made promises, I've also thought about, well, am I making this promise because I feel that I will not follow through? Or am I making this promise because I feel so strongly about this topic or this idea that I think that I will do it regardless, so it's better to reassure this person? I think there's a little problem here because in both cases, that's not the right approach. I think that in any case, making a promise is kind of a pitfall. And I'll explain to you why. I'll start with if you make a promise because you're really confident about it. Obviously, there are many specters to this and many variations, but I wanted to talk about a promise you make when you really believe in something and a promise you make when you don't think you're going to do something, but you make a promise to try and follow through on it. And so when you really think about, when you really believe in something, or you really know you're going to do something, you make a promise to reassure someone, to reassure yourself, I think that's also a pitfall because you never know what's going to happen. You make a promise and then you don't follow through, and that's really bad for you. I think if you're a person of integrity, it's always something that might happen. And I don't know if you've thought about this, why you make promises like this, but to me, there are kind of two things I think about. The first line of thought is that I want to make sure that the other person doesn't feel guilty or that they don't feel worried that I'm not going to do what I told them that I would do, even though it's something that I really strongly believe. Like I tell them, I'm not going to abandon you. I will not forget to buy groceries because I am not a person who breaks promises, etc., etc. And now, that's all great, but what does this promise really do? What if you cannot follow through on it? What if you promise to yourself, especially, not just to other people, but you promise to yourself, yes, I'm going to go to the store and I promise I'm going to go to the store today. Or I promise to myself that, and I will buy healthy food, for example. Or I promise to myself that I will study today because I really love studying. But then you still lock yourself in a prison because what if your plan changes? What if something unexpected happens? What if you don't need to study anymore? You've just broken your own promise. It's just so easy to break promises like this. And I think it's wrong. It's wrong because it breaks your own personal integrity. Because every time you make a promise and you break it, that means you don't follow through on what you say. And that's a really bad look, I think, for yourself, but also to other people. If you make the promise to other people, like saying, well, I will love you forever. That's definitely a promise. In some forms, there's also implicit and explicit promises. You don't really say them out loud, but you mean them. Those can also always be broken. Like, I'm always going to be a friend to you, and then you're not, because you just fell off. You don't have the same shared life anymore. You don't have the same values anymore. What I'm trying to say is we always change. Our circumstances change, and when you make promises like these, especially long-lasting, that can be devastating. But what about promises you make when you're not really sure about whether or not you're going to follow through on them? I think they are just as deadly, and they're even deadlier than the former, where you make promises because you're sure of yourself or you know you're going to follow through. And that's usually emotional, by the way. But these are also emotional, but they're in a different sense emotional, because I think they're more so made from a place of despair or a place of deep desire to change, but not really equipped with the right tools, right? So I am not really studious. I am not really a person who likes to go outside, but I say, I promise to myself, today I'm going to study. I promise to myself, today I'm going to go out for a walk. And then you go and you do them. Even if you do fulfill your promise, you feel really bad because you just did something you don't enjoy doing. Okay, you went out of your comfort zone, but if it's something you inherently do not like doing, you've just tortured yourself, basically. And I don't know if you ever thought about it like this, but I think it's just like this because it's something that you say to reassure yourself that you're going to do something. It's like another form of prison, only this time you're trying to force yourself into something. And that's just as deadly because it builds resentment. It builds resentment not just towards other people when you make these kinds of promises and you don't really believe in them, but also to yourself, because you just did something you didn't want to do, but you did it as a promise. And guess what's going to happen next? You're not going to make a promise to yourself anymore. You're not going to make promises at all. You're not going to strive for change organically, or when you actually get that motivation, or when you're at a correct place in life. That's not to say to never try, but I don't think a promise is the correct way to go about it, because it's a very, very vague thing, and it's a very important thing. When you make a promise, you follow through on it, because it builds your inner character and consistency. But then when you don't do it, you fail. You fail yourself. It's just as simple as that. And you will fail yourself many other times, potentially. There's no point in risking that, right? But what about to other people? When you say, I love you, and I will always love you, and I'll always be your friend, for example, but then you don't really feel that way. But you make that as a promise because maybe you don't want to hurt the other person. Maybe it's how you think you might feel inside, but you don't really feel inside it like that at that point in time. Or when you say, yes, I will definitely never lie to you, and I promise I'll never lie to you, even though I know that I've lied in the past and I don't really believe I'll hold myself to that promise. Well, more than likely, you're putting yourself in another prison again. Just a prison. Both types of promises are prisons. So I'm not arguing against using any kind of promises, but think about it. You are again ruining your integrity, because when you don't follow through on these promises, it's even worse. You just lie to yourself. You tell yourself something that you're not going to do. So not only do you lie when you break the promise, but you also lie to yourself that believes in what you or doesn't believe in what you just said. So you're breaking your own integrity, you're breaking your promise, and you're lying to yourself, but you're also lying to other people. So it's just a double, triple, quadruple whammy of bad vibes and bad deeds that definitely add up. Because, have you ever thought about how maybe we are the results of our actions and our inactions? Well, I think promises are things that drive us towards action and inaction, but in the wrong way, right? Instead of maybe being in the right mindset or growing in some way, reading a book maybe on motivation or something like that. I know that doesn't always work, but it's something. It's better than a promise, because the promise is a very heavy thing. At least that's how I interpret it. But I think that's how you should interpret it, because that's the weight we usually assign to it. There's people who break their promises all the time, but I don't think that's a good way to live your life, because you just have no integrity in yourself, and you're lying to yourself. You're lying to other people. You're breaking yourself day after day, and then you become this maybe amoral, lying person that is now going to have to change their habits if they're going to have those better morals. Of course, it's also subjective, morality and immorality, but to me, a promise is a promise, and in popular culture, it's a pretty important thing to say and to do. And if you cannot follow through on it, and you think you cannot follow through on it, but you still make it, you're lying to yourself. And if you think you will follow through on it and you still make it, and then you break it for some kind of reason, because life always changes and circumstances always change, you're still ruining your own integrity. So when would you promise? When do you even promise, I guess, in your life? I think you should make a promise when you just know, absolutely know, that nothing will ever, I really mean ever, get in the way of you fulfilling that promise, or make it so that you break your promise. And I think that's almost never in life. So really think about how you use promises. And I will also think about that. Obviously, it's a very open-ended topic. I am not preaching here. It's just something interesting that a lot of people in my life, they've broken their promises to me. I think I've always tried to maintain my promises, because I try to make them out of a place where I truly believe in what I say, and I know I won't break it, but I've seen that sometimes circumstances just get in the way. And even if I've said to somebody, well, I won't abandon you, but then, for example, they abandon me, then have I broken my promise? I don't know. But that's why promises are probably a very beautiful way to express yourself, in a very poetic way, but in real life, when push comes to shove, they probably will only sabotage you.